everybody. I'm back again and ill prepared because I accidentally started my Twitch stream going, but it's too late to stop now. So tonight I am going to read chapters 3 through 5 of one of my dad's novels. It's called Trollhunter, and it's about a group of troll hunters. And one of the newest members of the group. That's a very simplistic version of it. Um, I think I said I was going to do a recap from yesterday, but I'm learning really quickly that recaps from like the day before aren't always as clear as they should be. I do know that we ended off with a daring escape and me having concerns about gender roles in old fantasy novels. Mostly because this novel was written, I think, late 80s, early 90s, and it was written by somebody who was born in 1945. So he's much older. And I know that my mom and my mom thought of him as very progressive, and he possibly was, but that really, I mean, at the same time, so I have, so there's some views in these novels that are like things I'd like to update, maybe. I don't know. I overthink things a lot, so that's beyond me. But just note that I am still up in the air about this. However, without further ado, as well, as soon as I get ready. But I'll chat while I'm getting ready. That way it doesn't sound so bad. Yeah, so this is by no means one of his magnum opuses. Opie? Don't know how that goes. Anyway, but I know that he enjoyed this novel nonetheless. And I kind of like it because it reminds me a bit of the saga of Harem. It follows a very similar storyline. We'll see how similar it is as we go through the story. And I'll kind of flag it. Well, I'll still read it anyway because I need to read it through in order to do editorial changes on it anyway. Hopefully it's not too many are needed because then I can go through and publish it, not this month, but the end of next month. Here's hoping. This is the way it always is. If not, then I just go on to the next novel and so on and so on. However, I also have some old novels that I've read in the past on this channel. And what I might just do is because it's been a few years now. Can't believe I'm saying that. A few years since I've read some of these stories that I can actually possibly go back to them now and I can also reread some of the new changes I put in there and then edit that. So that's another way I might go. But for now, I've got 3 chapters to go through tonight, so here we go. And don't forget, I will also be live editing them. Yes, I kind of launched right into this without introducing myself or the channel. My name is Beth Wagner, and I am currently reading my dad's novels. I am marking them up for editing so that I can later on self-publish them. I've already published 12 of his books, including a couple short stories, and there's so much more. And some of them are just quick novels, and like this one is a standalone novel, but there are also other ones that are a little more epic. This one, it has the potential for being epic as well, but when I say epic, I mean there's one that has there's a series that has maps, has eddas, poems, that sort of thing. I'll be reading that later on, not much longer, because things are coming to my mind as I'm talking to you This is how you know it's not scripted. But neither here nor there. I'm going to go back now. I'm going to read you chapter 3. This time, Varian said, we may be fighting Trollkin as well. You've heard of them? You mean humans fighting in the service of a troll? Artran looked up from the flickering orange flames of the campfire. I thought they were just stories. The magician shook his head. No, they're real enough. And they can be nasty too. But why? Why would a human want to serve a troll? I've not made a thorough study of the situation, mind you, so I don't know all the particulars. But it seems that it works like this. A troll will make his den on the outskirts of a village, eating an occasional animal, or even an occasional visitor, or villager. Words. The people don't want to move away from their village, so they stay, everybody hoping that the troll will eat somebody else. Eventually, they come to bring food to the troll, and since the troll usually likes meat, they bring an animal. But that seldom satisfies the troll, so eventually he comes out and eats somebody else. That brings him to the next step, offering a person to the troll at regular intervals. Usually it's a traveler or a foreigner, but if they have to, they'll pick somebody from among themselves. In this case, they've taken to raiding nearby villages in search of offerings, which is why they've been hired. One would think that they'd be on our side, and they'd be happy to see the troll killed. Perhaps one might, but look at it from their side. If we fail to kill the troll, all we do is stir him up, make him angry, which means they have to go to more trouble to placate him. So much to keep us out altogether. Sorry, so much better to keep us out altogether. You sound almost as if you were on their side. Bothor chuckled across the campfire. Nope, boy. He, being a wizard, is. And wizards, looking at all sides of a situation, be. When it coming to battle is, he will fight. He will fighting them along with the rest of us. Fighting them be along with the rest of us. It all comes down to selfishness, said Callisto. Hmm. The wizard was non-committal. How do you see that? None of them want to move away from what they have. Every one of them wants a troll to eat somebody else. And if they can't find a traveler or a foreigner, why they'll knock down one of their own over the head, and every one of them will be glad it didn't turn out to be them. And they're afraid to stir things up by fighting the troll or getting someone to fight it for them. All of them afraid they might lose something what little they have. Selfishness. Hmm. There's much in what you say, though perhaps it is not quite so simple as that. But, as I have said, I have not made a particular study of Trollkin. Artran shifted slightly. Varian, will you be teaching me more magic to use in fighting, particularly considering the circumstances? The sorcerer frowned. Thug, Thug and races and all the green grasses, no. I taught you the fireballs because our companions were unwilling to see you sitting around like a lump and doing nothing in a troll fight. In ordinary circumstances, I would not have even hinted that there were such things for some years yet. No, as much as possible, will have your apprenticeship to follow traditional patterns. I can see no reason why you ought to know more serious magic just yet. But since you bring up the subject of magic, we have not worked on certain things for a while. Get out the scrying bowl, fill it, and say the spell. As the magician watched, Artran filled the bowl with water, then pronounced the spell. He knew that Farian was leading him away from the notion of learning any more fighting magic right now. His aggravation over that was only slightly tempered by the knowledge that he was sharpening one of his talents. Suddenly, the bowl showed a picture of the red-haired girl, dressed as a boy, standing in a clearing in some woods, hefting clumsily hefting a short sword. Artran looked up. No, boy, it's not another omen. Tell me, were you thinking of her before you began the spell? Yes. Artran felt himself blushing. Good. There's something you can practice at. Removing all distractions from your mind before you begin to use the scrying bowl. Now, take control of the bowl and look back at the inn where we first met. Artran took a deep breath and spoke the words that would assert his control over the scrying bowl. The battered sign of the old man Cascus leaped into focus. Now, look inside. Guided by Farron's suggestions, the young man looked through the various parts of the inn: the common room, the kitchen, the stable, and one or two empty rooms. Finally, Farron said, "Now, cancel the spell." Artran did so, suddenly aware of a great weariness. "Before you fall asleep," said the old wizard with a smile, "there are one or two things I want you to learn from this. First, who was old man Cascus?" Artran frowned. "I have no idea. The founder of the inn, perhaps?" Varian's smile went wider. "As a guess, that is not bad, but it is very wide of the mark. There is a god of one of the old people of this land, a god by the name of Casticus. He was, among other things, the god of hospitality. The old people have passed and gone away, but there are some traces of them left behind. The next thing is this. You will have noticed I'd never asked you to look at anything anyone might consider private. Can you think of a reason for this?" "Well," said the young man slowly, "it's not right to invade anyone's privacy." Very simply put, and correct, in a simple sort of way. But what if you have good reason to know that someone is plotting against someone near and dear to you? Would it then be allowable to invade their privacy? And can you think of a rule regarding the protection of privacy?" Artran yawned. "No, I see you cannot do so at the moment. But think it over for a while. In a day or two, I will ask you again. But a simpler question now. Why do I not use the bowl to see just what we face ahead? Could it have something to do with the troll's resistance to magic? Very good. He might be a tolerable apprentice after all. Yes, it is mostly a matter of the troll's resistance to magic. And there's one thing you ought to know about the scrying bowl. It can show the future, but only the possible future. Anything may happen to change that future. Even the fact that you have seen it in the bowl. So be wary of trusting it so much." The next day, as they continued to travel toward the village and the troll, Callisto suddenly held up her hand to signal a halt, then pointed off to the left in the woods. A dark figure was shambling along with little regard for bushes or saplings, trampling them under as it went. At first, Artran thought it to be a troll, but it did not move like a troll. "What is it?" he whispered to Farian. "Some sort of giant?" "No, it's a statue of Gothraz." "The statue of Gothraz? But—" Farron turned in the saddle and looked at him. "That thug and racist and bird all the birds with feathers. You thought I'd made that story up to impress the lesson on you? Well, I'm not saying I'd never do that, but I certainly didn't make up this one. And as I've said, no one is quite sure how it distinguishes an enemy from a friend, so we want to wait for it to get well ahead of us before we carry on." He thought for a moment, then said, "Do you think we should hope that he doesn't not find the troll in the village?" Blah, blah, blah. "Do you think we should hope he does not find the troll in the village we are traveling to? If he does, we will not get paid." "Does he consider all trolls to be enemies then?" "From all accounts I've heard, he will never pass by a troll." "But magic animated him. Could not magic reverse that?" "Most likely so. But too often when he attacks, no one has time to do much spell casting." "If he is such a danger, why did you not cast a spell when we saw him traveling at a distance?" Varian looked at him. "Very full of questions today, aren't you?" "Yes, I might have tried to deanimate him with it at a distance, but it's difficult to say which spell would work and which would not. And I'm fairly certain that casting this wrong spell would merely anger him. And then I might or might not have time to ready and cast another spell before he did damage to the party. On the other hand, if I do nothing and he moves on, we have no problem at all. Does that satisfy you?" Artran wisely said nothing. They did not merely march up the main road to the village. "They'll have somebody watching the roads," said Callisto. "At the very least, a youngster who will run back to warn them. Best we get in and finish most of the fighting before the people find out. One moment. Let us see if the troll is actually at home first. Trolls are resistant to magic, but that very resistance can be used to find them." They waited then, while the wizard cast his spells. He finally looked up and nodded. "Into the woods we go then." So they heaved and sweated through the underbrush, trying hard not to make too much noise. Finally, Callisto signaled a halt once again, then handed the reins of her horse over to Beckel, while she crept up quietly. She crept quietly up to the edge of the clearing in which the village sat. After a long and serious while, she returned. Sorry, a long and nervous while, she returned. "There is some good news and some bad. The beast's lair is not on the far side of town. It's a little further down from where we stand, though. That is, the shortest path from here takes us diagonally across the fields. Chances are we'll be seen before we get there. Suppose we work our way through the brush until we can make a dash the shortest way?" asked Beckel. "We might try that. Every moment we spend in these woods, though, we have a better chance of being discovered." "You advocate a straight run from here?" asked Varian. "Yes, that's about it." Bothor let out a grunt. "So what are we waiting?" Oh my goodness. Sorry, he's really hard. "So what we waiting for are. Let us be let us going be before we taking root are." I'm sorry I'm butchering his speech. It's bad. Not that his speech is bad, it's just it's really hard because of the way he speaks. As they made their way to the edge of the forest, Pothor dropped back to speak to Artran. "Look, boy, people being funny are. Even when we have the troll slaying finished, they might not looking on us as heroes be. Take no chances." Artran nodded, less aware of what the big warrior was saying than of the slippery willow wand in his hand. It was a strange, silent charge. Ordinarily, they'd be shouting as they came, but in this case, they hoped to get to the troll before the villagers could be alerted. They had come halfway across the field before anyone in the village was aware of them. A man shouted and ran back around the houses. Artran was sure the man wasn't fleeing, but rather running to alert the rest of the town. They came into the place the troll had claimed for himself. The now familiar stench washed over Artran. They could hear shouting from the village, and the grunting noises of a troll roused from his sleep. Artran dropped back to his expected position. Varian fell back a little behind Artran. The beast surged out of his den, angered at the disturbance. Kellis Doh put 2 arrows into him before he was aware of the situation. He roared and charged. Artran cast a fireball quickly. He aimed for the chest, but caught the beast in the broad face by some fluke. The troll took a few beats to recover from that. Pothor and Beckel rode in fast and began chopping with their swords. Artran could not use another fireball until the swordsman moved back. As he sat there waiting for his chance, a whoosh sound came from behind, and he had to calm the horse again. When he had time to look, a semicircular wall of fire blazed behind them. Running from the wall of one house to the wall of one of the ruined ones where the troll lived. He looked at Varian. Keep the villagers off for a while, the magician said. With any luck, we can finish this off before the fire fails. Watch the battle, boy. And indeed, there was more to watch. The troll had recovered sufficiently to fight at close quarters. It forced the 2 swordsmen to back away. Kellis Dol shot a couple of arrows into it, and it charged her. Varian made some sort of gesture, and the troll stopped as if struck by something large and heavy. It shook its head and came on. Artran cast another fireball. He would have aimed it at the head again, but he was afraid the last time was too much of a fluke. He couldn't be so lucky again. Instead, he aimed at the massive torso, and had the satisfaction of seeing the troll stop and paw at the burned patch on his left breast. That allowed Pothor to ride in and slash at the troll from behind. As he turned to face that threat, Beckel came from another direction. But the beast would not turn from Pothor, so Artran cast his last fireball. That made the difference. The troll whirled and charged in his direction. Varian cast what seemed to be a javelin of light. That struck the troll and slowed it down visibly. The 2 swordsmen came up from behind, slashing repeatedly at it, and it stumbled and fell. But the fight was not quite over. Kellis Doh shot repeated arrows into it. The swordsman took the chance and dismounted to hack at it as it tried to rise. The wizard, obviously tired from the spells he had already cast, sagged in the saddle. The semicircle of fire beyond them burned a little lower. Artran contemplated dismounting and going at the troll himself. No, all I can do is get in the way of the fighters. At Thug and Phrasis and all the wild windstorms. I wish I knew more spells. The troll rose. A glancing blow of a great fist sent Beckel whirling off to fall and slide onto the grass. As the troll advanced on Beckel, the small swordsman came to his feet, staggering slightly. Pothor came in behind on light feet, slashing and chopping until the beast fell again. Twice more it got up again, and once it even managed to hit Kellis Doh with a thrown stone. With a twist of her lithe body, she managed to avoid anything but a glancing hit. But it took her a moment to recover enough to use her bow again. At last the troll ceased struggling. Now Artran did get down from his horse and help pile wood over him, tearing sticks from the ruined buildings around and setting them on fire. Varian, a little more recovered, lent a hand as well. As they watched the troll burn, Varian muttered, "It's too quiet out there. I'm afraid the trollkin are up to something." There was a sudden scream of mingled rage and horror from the other side of the troll's den. They and the top edge looked up, and the top edge of the heap in which the troll had lived was lined with armed villagers. Varian looked at Artran with a tired smile. Well, apparently this band of trollkin, at any rate, does not look on the slayer of their troll as heroes. That's chapter 3. Okay. And now we go on to chapter 4. They were a ragged lot, variously armed with hatchets, spears, and a couple of bows. Pothor, Beckel, and Callisto swung into their saddles and waited. Varian called up to the villagers, "The beast is dead, you are free!" Someone among the tattered bunch shouted, "They have slain the Great One! The luck of our village is gone! Kill the outsiders!" One of them half slid down the grassy mound, waving a hatchet. Callisto shot him before he reached the bottom, and he fell, rolling and sliding the rest of the way. But the others were not dissuaded by that. Down they came themselves, shouting and screaming incoherently. Artran spoke the words and brought a fireball into his hand, then threw it at one of them. The man shrieked horribly and fell, still burning. A great weariness came over Artran. Too soon after the fight with the troll for me to be using magic. Varian pulled himself upright and pointed a finger at the attackers. He said something, then swept his pointing finger in a short sideways arc. 5 villagers went down. In the meantime, Pothor and Beckel charged in from the flanks. They wielded their swords competently, and their horses fought for them as well. Callisto shot the last 2 arrows into the mob, then dropped her bow into the case. She moved in with her sword out. If the villagers had trained to fight together, they could easily have disposed of the Trollhunters. As it was, every man fought for himself with no coordination, often enough getting in each other's way. For a little time they fought well enough, but they had little real will. One ran first, followed by several more. Then the rest, save for 2 armed with hatchets, who continued to fight until they were chopped down. The whole troll hunters looked around at each other. The troll hunters looked around at each other. "Is anyone wounded badly enough to need patching up right now?" asked Varian. "I'm about to bring down the fire barrier, and it may well be that we will have to charge through more villagers on the way out." "All right, make ready. Here we go." The fire barrier fell suddenly, all at once, and beyond it stood a knot of people, some armed, who looked as though they were wondering what to do. As the horses moved forward, Varian shouted, "Fight only if you must. Make for the woods, then we regroup." Off they went, going out on both sides of the group of villagers, making for the woods. The magician and Artran went first, followed by Pothor, with the other 2 bringing up the rear. There was no real pursuit, only a wild arrow that went wide to the left of the fleeing troll hunters. When they got to the edge of the woods, they turned and saw that the villagers were busily checking the dead and wounded from the skirmish around the troll's den. None were coming after them. All the same, said Beckel, I will feel better if we put a good deal of distance between ourselves and this village before we camp for the night. Are you able to ride, wizard? For that long, at least. Varian hauled himself upright in the saddle. What of you, Artran? You used a little more power than you ought to back there. Though I won't say you wasted it. Can you ride for a while? By now, Artran had time to think about the whole thing. The battle with the troll and the fact that the villagers had fought, though not for long, to avenge the troll's death. The village and the villagers had been equally ill kept, which is no real wonder. If you might be eaten by a troll at any time, why bother worrying about appearances? And the man had screamed when the fireball hit. The whole thing sickened him. He forced a grin. If I can't, would you just flop me over my saddle and lead my horse along? I want to get out of here. That brought a few grim chuckles. Then they were away. They did not run the horses with only stars for light, but kept them going at a walk for some time. Beckel said eventually, even if we should decide to come after even if they should decide to come after us today, it'd take them a while to come so far. I'd suggest we all have a rest. So both men and animals rested. And the fighters saw to the worst of the various scrapes and nicks they had taken. They set watches and managed to get some sleep. About midday, they moved off once again at a slightly swifter pace until nightfall. At about midday, they moved off once again. Oops. That evening, as they rested around the campfire, Artran said, what I still cannot fathom is the attitude of the villagers. They referred to the troll as the luck of the village. Rather than seeing him as something to get rid of, they felt he had to be avenged. Varian nodded. I've heard rumors of cases where the troll was actually worshipped, with one of the villagers acting as a shaman who presented offerings to the troll. They would also pray to the troll for rain, for good harvests, and the like, always accompanying such prayers with more offerings. It is possible that what we have here is something of that sort. But the troll is a chancy brute. How do they explain the fact that he will occasionally eat one of his worshippers, perhaps even the shaman himself? Varian shrugged. The way such things are usually explained, I should think. The one who was eaten had been slack in his belief. I'd hoped that this village might be not so far gone, but we managed. Darajua stepped into the common room of the tavern, displaying an air of boldness which she did not really feel. She paused, looking around for the sort of man she was seeking. She knew about this place only by reputation, having overheard snatches of conversation by caravan guards from time to time. It was reputed to be a favorite haunt for the type of man she was looking for. Over against the wall, facing the door, was a slightly older man with a sword at his waist. He was not gulping down one cup of ale after another, as most others were, but taking one sip at a time. Though he did not look like a man who would reject company, he did look like a man who might be choosy about the company he did pick. A hand pushed her from behind. Are you going to stand there all day blocking the door, boy? She staggered forward 2 steps, and then recovered her balance. She turned and muttered, sorry, to the man coming in behind her. They made her way over to the man at the table. May I sit down here? Sorry. May I sit down here? She asked, deepening her voice slightly. I prefer to be alone. He looked up at her, and she got the feeling he was assessing her carefully. I have a proposition for you, she said, not sitting without his permission. That got her another careful look, with a sigh. Let me guess. You've got yourself into trouble with too many people for you to handle, and you want me to take care of you. The answer is no. No, I hope to take care of myself without hiring someone to fight for me. My proposal is quite different. He gestured at the chair in front of her. Sit and tell me about this admirable proposal of yours. Mind you, I'm only agreeing to listen. Of course, she said as she took her seat. She took a cup of wine from the innkeeper, took a sip at it, and prevented herself from grimacing at the taste. She looked over at the table and said, I want you to teach me how to use a sword. He looked at her and smiled. You wear a sword. Can you not use it? Sorry, you wear a sword. Can you not use it? Well, I can use it rather clumsily to split wood, but in a fight I would be dead in moments. I need proper lessons. And someone is hunting you and you might need to know how to fight? No, no one's hunting my life right now, she answered. But if you wear a sword, you're expected to be able to use it. And at some time, someone is likely to press me to use it. And there I will be. So, will you help me? And should I do this out of the goodness of my heart? No, I have some money. I can pay for lessons. Suppose I can take you on. Are you one of those who will argue with everything I say? Who will have a better idea all the time? I seriously doubt that since I have no ideas at all right now. I'll try to keep my arguing for times when I think there's something to be worth arguing about. So, how much are we talking per lesson then? I think I'd prefer to go on at a daily rate. Say 2 coppers a day? Say 3 silvers. And I look like King Hogar come down from Tenera to the city to get sword lessons in Vinich? 5 coppers. Shortly they reached an agreement which satisfied both of them. Though Darishua considered her resources and hoped she could learn in enough days to make that matter worthwhile. And in all this time, he said, we have not mentioned names. I am Kamlutran. I am Gamil. It was a name Darishua had already picked for herself, so it came out without hesitation. Where and when do you want to meet for the first lesson? Suppose we meet here in the morning, and then find a place for the lessons. Beatrice Fee was shown into the presence of Fe- Fehimortor, Fairmortor. The wizard who had been merely the dreamy-eyed fellow in the mid-ranks of the counselors was now quite alert and sharp-eyed. The king hoped this meant something worthwhile. You bear good news, I hope? Yes, lord, I do. By our studies, we have developed a spell which will break down the wall of Finnish. There is one possible difficulty, however. The mortar frowned. I don't like this. I don't like the sound of that. What is this difficulty? The spell is from the east, lord, and as such it will require blood sacrifice. And not any blood sacrifice, but a human. So I will be sacrificing any number of soldiers to take the city. What is one more? And I have plenty of slaves. Gatrus Fee shook his head slightly. Lord, it is true that the sacrifice of any person might have the desired effect, but to be certain, the person must have certain attributes. The person must be female and must have been conceived when the stars were in a certain conjunction. Bah! So I send my agents all over the countryside to ask of every mother when her child was conceived? First you tell me the thing is possible, then you tell me it requires conditions which are impossible. No, Lord, not so. Gatrus Fee was very conciliatory. We have skilled people who are able to trace by magic where children were born, who were conceived at the appropriate time, and even which of them are female. It is then a matter of going to the pertinent places and discovering which of the children fit other certain criteria. Oh my goodness. Then it is then a matter of going to the pertinent places and discovering which of the children fit certain other criteria which are preferred. Other criteria? The king's voice was dangerously low. How many of these other criteria are there? Sorcerer, if you are wasting my time and my gold on some wild search for a three-armed child or such like, you will not be happy in the end. No, no, Lord. The main thing is the conjunction of the stars. We can, if need be, take the first woman conceived at that time, and she'll no doubt serve well enough. The other criteria are merely matters which will make the task a little easier. Humph. Well, go to it then. And mind, I do not have infinite patience. There is a limit to the time I will wait for you to get your stars aligned and your potions mixed, and whatever else it takes. Yes, Lord. We will be going to work at once, Lord. Gatrus Fee backed himself out of the presence of the king. The snow was falling. The first snowfall of the season in these uplands. Huge, fluffy flakes collected on tree branches and bushes and any other unmoving surface. It was cold as well, though not unbearably so, as the Trollhunters followed the track through the hills. They decided to finish this one last job before going down to the lowlands for the winter. They had almost enough money to see themselves through to spring, though they might have to take on some sort of other work later on, bodyguarding, caravan guarding, or the like. The troll that they were going after now had not yet taken over a village, but was raiding a wide area from his den in the wilds. 3 small villages had contributed to pay the fee required by the troll hunters. We'll have to be careful about this one, Varian had said. We're getting in close to the territory of the Holy Band. Artran, tell us what this means. Artran had long ago ceased to be surprised by the times and circumstances that his master had picked to test the knowledge of his apprentice. They're a military order, restricted to men only, dedicated to the practice of arms. On occasion, they will hire out some of their number to one or other of the kings, and they always send at least a token tribute to whichever king is on top. That means the kings tend to leave them alone, let them enforce their own laws and their own justice within their borders. Thank you, boy. Varian's voice said nothing about whether he was pleased or displeased with his apprentice's recital. Artran knew from experience, though, that if he had left out anything of importance, Varian would have no hesitation in pointing it out. Pothor's horse threw up his head and neighed. The old boy smelling something is, said the warrior. Most likely a troll is. It is, and it most likely being a troll is. Keep a sharp eye out. Callisto brought her bow out of the case and strung it. muttering about the effect of this damp weather on her bowstring. Artran found his grip tightening on his willow wand and forced himself to loosen it. Varian had drilled it into him that magic was best performed with as calm a mind as possible. A few minutes later, the rank scent of troll was in everyone's nostrils, and eyes flicked from one patch of scrub to another, hoping to see the troll before it saw them. The track led straight across to a small clearing. Despite the snow, the path could still be seen as sort of a depression in the otherwise flawless white blanket on the ground. There was a sudden roar, and snow flew from under the arc formed by the fallen tree. The troll, moving more quickly than one would have expected, lunged toward them. Artran cast a fireball, which hit the troll in the chest at the same time Spharian's magic bolt staggered him. The beast almost fell, steadied itself, and with one hand on the ground, then came back up, moving forward. When it touched the ground, it came up with a smooth rock about the size of a human's two fists and hurled it. There is no way of being sure whether it was a chance or definite aim, but the stone hit Artran. It glanced off his shoulder, leaving his arm numb. A sudden anger flamed in his mind. 3 stinking fireballs, all this time remembering spells and herbs, and when it came to a fight, what do you have, Artran? His horse went into one of its dances, and he pulled it out under control. What was that spell you drilled in yesterday? The fiery chain, that was it. Concentrating through the wooden wand in his hand, Artran said the words while pointing at the troll. Power flared out of him in a flash of light. A thin orange line crisscrossed the troll's body, sizzled briefly, then disappeared. Artran slumped forward, suddenly recalling warnings about using too much power at a time. Struggling against the loss of consciousness, he grabbed the horse's mane to hold himself on the animal's back. The horse, never very calm in stressful circumstances, took advantage of his rider's lack of control to bolt. Off they went. Artran, half conscious and too busy holding himself onto the horse to do much in the way of bringing the beast under control. They galloped for some time. Then the horse swerved suddenly, and Artran was flung free. When he hit the ground, consciousness fled. The snow continued to fall, covering him. Excuse me. Okay. And now we're on to chapter 5. The fire stank of burning troll. Pothor looked around at the trampled snow and his 3 companions and asked, Young Artran, where is he being? Ha, said Beckel. He took off down the trail like a scared jackrabbit at sight of the fight. No, Varian shook his head. He was struck by a stone flung by the troll. After that, he tried to cast a spell that was beyond his present abilities. I imagine that left him half conscious, and the horse ran away with him. He picked up Artran's willow wand and thrust it through his sash. Beckel shrugged. If you say so. Why doesn't he come back then? I would say the horse threw him somewhere. Callisto, could you follow the tracks? Like enough if we move quickly. The snow is falling, though, and the tracks may soon be wiped out. The snow continued to fall. A typical snowfall of these uplands. As it fell, the Trollhunters followed the tracks of Artran's fleeing horse. Varian found himself wondering, as he did from time to time, if there was some sort of magic in Callisto's ability to follow the tracks. To him, they simply did not seem to exist any longer, and he was fully conscious of the direction in which they were moving. This way lay the territory of the Holy Band, though it was possible that they might be able to make their way a short distance into that territory and back out again in this weather. That was a possibility, not a certainty, and it did not pay to upset the Holy Band. Hold a moment, he called. They all looked at him. That tree has carved on it a glyph, the sign of the Holy Band. From that point on, we'll be in their territory. I'd be willing to take the risk myself, but I will not demand it of any of you. His horse going that way is? Yes. Then going that way for a while I am. Then I going for a while the going that way for a while am. Blah 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 blah. I suppose someone ought to go along and see just what trouble he's gotten himself into, said Bethel gruffly. And none of you can track your way across a muddy plain, said Callisto, so you'll be needing me. So then, let us be going. But a little further on, Callisto had to admit that even she could no longer see tracks, what with the falling dusk and continual snow. She turned to the wizard. Is there any way you can track him? I have recovered a little from the fight with the troll, so let me see. He took Artran's wand in his hand and spoke a few words. There was a blue glow around the wand, which went out about 4 steps into the wood, then faded. He tried again with the same result. What does that mean? Said Callisto. It means that some kind of magic is hiding him from me. I suspect it will be a stronger magic than any I have. He's not dead? No. If he were dead, the glow would have been dark violet. That much counter magic can't hide from me. I wish I knew more about the Holy Band than stories and rumors. One of the rumors is that their members in their territory are strongly resistant to magic. What this seems to indicate is that Artran has somehow become one of them. Become one of them? That thug and racist, what does that mean? Demanded Beckel. Farian shrugged and answered mildly. It means that magic does not have all the answers for everything. I really doubt he's joined them as a warrior, but the magic seems to indicate he is part of the group. And that may not be certain, As I have said, there's some powerful magic at work here, and it may be that is skewing the work of my own spell. You suggesting are that there no possibility of rescuing him is? Very little, I'm afraid. When I gotten myself back into proper condition, I'll start seeing what I might do, just what I might do. But for now, I think we better find ourselves a camping place somewhere outside of the territory of the Holy Band. Do do do. Artran pulled himself up out of unconsciousness. He was cold, and something was poking him repeatedly in the side. Beside that, his head ached brutally, and it was pain for him to move his left shoulder. He opened his eyes and looked up. A man was looking down at him, a brown-faced, hawk-nosed man who wore an old-fashioned leather corselet and an equally old-fashioned helmet with a carefully trimmed orange plume on top. He had a sword at his waist and wore brown leather breeches. In his hand he held a spear, the butt of which he was using to poke at Artran. He spoke with a strong accent, using the saga spoken practically by everyone in these parts. Get yourself up, boy. You're on the land of the Holy Band and subject to our laws. Artran dragged himself to his feet. He forced his foggy brain to think. I'm sorry, sir. We were fighting a troll, and my horse ran away with me and threw me here. I had no intention of trespassing on your land. Man shrugged. Makes no difference to me. Our laws are our laws, and by them you have a choice. You can't, if you wish, you can become a slave to the band. If you refuse that, then you'll be killed out of hand. So, what is your choice? Look, I didn't come here on purpose. Whether you came here on purpose or not, our law is our law. Make your choice. It was very clear that there would be no talking with this man. Artran tried to call up a fireball, but all he got was a tingling on his hand. His wand was gone, of course, but even then, he would have expected a little more than that. He assessed himself. No, he was at least halfway recovered from having overused his power. Was there something wrong with his magic here? He looked up at the man. No, there was no talking to him. Perhaps his superiors might be willing to listen, but the man readied his spear to end matters with a short thrust. All right, I'll be a slave of the order. He felt a slight tingling as he spoke. A feeling that he recognized having something to do with magic, but he had no time to think what that might mean. This man smiled a grim little smile. So then, the first thing is to learn is that when you address the member of an order, you call him Holy Sir. And the next thing you learn is that a slave's life is not that bad, but if you attempt to escape, it will go hard with you. Understand? Yes, Holy Sir. Good. Now you can see to my horse's tracks in the snow. You follow the back trail until I tell you to turn off. Yes, Holy Sir. Suppressing a groan or two, Artran started walking. Yatra's fee scowled at the documents on the table. He had assured King Motor that the process was simple, since that was what the king wanted to hear. But the fact was, the process was not at all simple. Magic could take you far. A crystal could be empowered to detect the presence of one conceived at the appropriate time. One could not make the crystal distinguish between male and female, not without making the thing too erratic in its operation to be worthwhile. One could then take maps of various cities and swing the crystal over them, reciting the appropriate words. Getting a positive reading there, one could go on to maps of specific quarters of the city and swing the crystal over them. At that point, it was necessary to send actual people to those quarters of the city that turned up positive. The crystal would glow as it came near a house where someone had been born at that appropriate time. It was then a matter of asking the house who had been born there between the months of Saturn and Hildepin 18 years ago. They had managed to produce only 3 of the crystals, which meant that a mere 3 search groups had to cover the whole kingdom. The fact that they did not have to cover the whole kingdom, it was entirely likely they would find an appropriate subject in Mothoquen itself, or at the worst, in one of the other major cities. They had borrowed small squads of troops from the king, since a man in the robes of a magician asking questions about people might find himself in the center of a riot. If he had a bodyguard of soldiers to demonstrate that he was on the king's business, there should be less difficulty. But still, the reports were coming in negative. Several babies conceived at the appropriate time had died as infants. Several more had died of disease before growing up, and some moved out of the city, with no one behind knowing where they might have gone. At present, They had one young man of 18, but he'd been crippled due to an accident in his childhood. No one would risk using him as a sacrifice in a critical spell. And the king was constantly sending, and so I'm not really sure about that part either. We'll go on. And the king was constantly sending messages to Katris, requiring news of his progress. How long could he satisfy the monarch by telling him that everything was progressing as well as could be expected? There was a rap at his chamber door. Probably more bad news. Come in, he called. One of his associates came in with an expression of triumph. This was not one of the tasks he wanted to assign any of his younger assistants. One could never tell which of them might suddenly rebel at the thought of what they were doing. As for himself, he did not care for the thought of human sacrifice, but carrying out the spell would gain him the favor of, in the eyes of the king. That favor, particularly the part of it that was shown in gold and silver, would allow him to undertake many studies which he had always wanted to try, but had always lacked the time and funds. Have you good news for me for a change? He growled. We found a girl, born at the appropriate time, with red hair. She is the daughter of a merchant. The red hair had been one of the criteria he had not mentioned to the king, for fear of arousing his anger. And where have you put her? The fellow's face fell a bit. Actually, we do not have our hands on her at the moment. Her father takes her along on many of his trips, and she's with him now. He's expected back in the city at any time. She accompanies him frequently, you say? So we are told. Well, that may be a good sign too. Did you make sure that we would be informed when the merchant arrives back in the city? Certainly. Well, we've done what we can then. Unless one of our other teams brings in a red-headed girl. Had you noticed an interesting fact about this whole project? Most children conceived at the appropriate time appear to have been male. Now, if one was the sort that studies all the effects that stars have on human beings, this might make a fascinating study. It has to be female then? Almost definitely. I know that I let our royal masters think otherwise, and indeed, we might have some effect with someone conceived at the appropriate time. But to make the spell certain, it has to be a woman with red hair, and preferably one of substantial courage. If she travels along with her father, she will probably not be one of the shrinking fainting sort. Let us see what the future brings. The Rijua fingered the hilt of the sword and hoped that the caravan would not see any trouble, at least until she had a few more sessions with Kamitron. She was no longer a mere beginner with the sword, but she was far from being an expert. She recalled how Kamitron had looked at the way she held her sword and said, That sword's too big for you. Where did you come by it, anyway? Oh, I got it when I left home. Hmm. Do you have any sort of sentimental attachment to it then? Not really. She was still wondering if he'd noticed her stumbling over the question of where the sword had come from, and whether he had or not chosen to ignore it. Good. First thing we'll do is we'll take it down and sell the thing, and buy something you can actually handle. She was glad she'd spent that time chopping trees before she came looking for lessons. She knew from watching the caravan guards more or less how to hold the sword. Practicing on trees gave her the ability to take a firm grip on the hilt, which helped her masquerade along. But well before she'd gotten even adequate with the blade, she was running out of money. She told Kamutran that and thanked him for the lessons. So, where do you go now? I'll spend a few days practicing what you've taught me. Then I'll try to get a job of some kind. Probably a caravan guard or the like. He shook his head. You wouldn't make it. The caravan master would ask you to demonstrate your ability and tell you to go away and come back when you'd grown up. I'll have to think of something else then. He smiled one of his rare smiles and then said, Come along. They'd gone down to part of the city that was filled with caravans preparing to leave. The braying of donkeys and snorting of camels, along with the neighing of horses, made it nigh impossible to hear anything that was not shouted. All the animals kicked up a fine dust with their tramping, and their smells mixed together were almost overpowering. Kamutran walked around the edges of the mass, looking for someone. Suddenly, without warning, he stepped in, obviously heading somewhere. Darujwa followed him. Darujwa followed him. They came up to a squat bronzed man who wore leather breeches and a jacket and carried a coiled whip in his hand. He looked up at Kamutran and said, No, we're not giving handouts to broken down soldiers. Go look somewhere else. Broken down soldiers, is it, Dennis Tro? Perhaps your memory isn't too so good. Perhaps you don't remember Yashka Hill and a bandit who was about to put his javelin in your back when I dissuaded him? I always thought you were a man who paid his debts. Ha! He had been smoking jackweed and would likely have missed anyway. But I suppose I did agree that I owed you some sort of debt. What would you want in payment? Take me and my young friend out as guards on your caravan. Dennis Tro scowled. We might take you, but can't haul passengers. My friend is young, but I've been training him. And if it upsets you, you only need to pay him 3/4 wages. 1/4. Half. All right then, half. But he better pull his weight. So now they're on their way to Mothquen, one of the last caravans of the season before the fall rains made the roads impassable. Every evening, she and Kamutran drilled with the sword until she was sure she could practically do the sword drills in her sleep. In addition, Kamutran had given her a patch of leather attached to 2 long thongs. This is a sling, he said, demonstrating how it is used. It's a weapon that doesn't depend on the weight of the man using it, and you always have ammunition as long as there's rocks handy. Pick up a few every morning and practice with it a bit. After you've got so you can send the rock in the direction you intend to, then practice it while you're riding. Eventually you'll get good enough with it to make a difference. Somewhere back along the way, she realized that having her father take her along practically everywhere he went had given her a slight advantage, for it made her familiar with caravan life, with their troubles and difficulties and how to make the best of them. And it made her realize, too, that a merchant who was traveling this close to the fall rains must have serious reasons for doing so, usually financial, and would do his best to stint on anything possible. In such a case, the merchant might sorry. In such a case, the merchant might stint on caravans, reasoning that if he did not manage to get through, he would be dead and no longer have to worry about his creditors. But what if bandits ran off with only a small part of the shipment? He might then find himself with not enough to pay the creditors, which would be a serious problem. In this case, the merchant had stinted slightly on the caravan guards, refusing to go buy armor for De- Darujua beyond a leather jacket, and supplying horses whose only redeeming quality was that they were probably too tough to die on the trail. She was interrupted in her reverie by the need to bring her horse under control. He displayed a tendency to take off for the horizon if he felt his rider were not firmly in his control. He had lost her a couple of times at the beginning, but by now she was more used to his tricks and could deal with him reasonably well. Another thing she realized about this trip was that she and Camertran would have to be quick about demanding their wages when they reached their destination. The merchant might conveniently disappear, leaving the two guards to stand in line behind his other creditors for their pay. She had mentioned that to Camertran, who smiled slightly and said, "You've learned more than sword handling and riding on this trip, then." Which made her feel a bit foolish, because of course a man of his experience would know about that all would know all about that sort of thing. And she figured the hilt of her sword and she fingered the hilt of her sword and hoped for a safe trip. Blah blah blah. Hard. Artran ached all over. It was his third day as slave of the Holy Band, and things had not gone altogether well. He had attempted to escape last night, carrying only a crust of bread he had saved from his supper and one of the blankets allotted to the slaves. It had been a fiasco from start to finish, through freezing cold with his belly complaining most of the time, and he was almost glad when it ended. He had been walking through the snow, shivering, with his blanket around him when he heard the hoofbeats behind him. He turned to see a pair of warriors bearing down at him, considered running for a moment, then decided it wasn't worth the trouble. The younger of the two stood by, looking grim, while the elder of the two spoke to him. "Trying to escape, slave?" "Yes, holy sir." What he could have said was, "No, holy sir, I was out picking daisies for the table." "Done a poor job of it, haven't you?" "Yes, holy sir." "Head on back to the barns. If you feel my spear pricking your backside, you'll know you're going too slow." "Yes, holy sir." He had not been surprised at all to feel the spear point as soon as he started. In fact, they kept him at a run all the way to the barn doors. He'd been beaten with sticks and well and thoroughly he'd been beaten with sticks, well and thoroughly beaten, and left no comfortable position to lie in. All he could manage to do was find the least uncomfortable position. "Next time I run away, I will know the situation better and be better prepared." Marion looked at the blank scrying bowl in front of him and wiped the sweat from his face. The Holy Band certainly did have magical protection. Now to take the news to his friends waiting in the common room of the tavern. They were involved in a vigorous discussion, and the noise in the tavern was generally high. But his three comrades looked up when he came into the room. He sat down heavily at the table, signaled to the waiter for wine, and turned to the others. "Well, I've learned several things. First of all, the Holy Band have magical protection on their territory. Fortunately, it seems to be a passive protection, not something that strikes back at those who pry. For all that, it is hellishly difficult to get through, even with a non-threatening scrying spell. It's an old-fashioned spell, but very well done. And young Artran is being held there as a stable slave, and has suffered a bad beating recently. Could we possibly making a quick raid be in snatching the boy bee out again?" The wizard shook his head. "They'll know as soon as we cross our border. If we keep coming, they'll know we haven't just lost our way, and they'll be all over us like mad hornets." "So we leave it as it is?" Callisto demanded. "Artran is a fair to middling apprentice, and I hate to leave him as a stable slave, Nor do I intend to rush to the rescue and get slaughtered for my pains. There are good reasons, why none of the kings have ever tried to bring the Holy Band to heel. In any case, the middle of winter is not the time to try to make any such raid. I want to spend some time gathering information and making plans before we do anything. So, what will happen? And here's the thing. The thing is like I was saying earlier, I have chapters 1 through 20, and then I have a chapter 39. So, I'm kind of, and I don't even know if chapter 39 is actually the end of the story. I don't know if chapter 20 is the end of the story. So, we're going to go on this little ride together, you and me, and we're going to find out what happens next. And that's all we can know. And in the end, the full story will be told. It's just a matter of whether it's already been told and I'm just editing it, or if I'm going to have to fill in between chapters 21 to chapters 38. We'll find out shortly. But even sooner than that, tune in on Monday for me to give a follow up to to continue on with chapter 6. Now, please bear with me. I'm having some personal things going on. I'm going to be going for surgery, so and it's facial surgery. I'm just not sure how severe it's going to be when I'm done. So just so everyone's aware, it's fine. I'm fine so far. But yeah, I will talk to you guys all on Monday, and yeah, it might just look a little weird. Anyway, I will have a good weekend, everybody, and I'll talk to you guys all on Monday. Night.